You're listening to the Alpha Love Stories, where love is dangerous, loyalty bleeds, and silence hides more than words ever could. If you crave dark, forbidden romances filled with obsession and fate, like this video and subscribe, because this story will own your heartbeat. They say children make promises they never mean to keep. But that night, I meant every word. The moon hung low over Blackthorn Valley, pale and enormous, like it was listening. The scent of pine and rain clung to the air, and I remember clutching my little wool blanket tighter, my bare feet muddy from sneaking out of the pack house. I was only 7, too small to understand the weight of oaths, too naive to know that the Alpha King standing before me was not someone a little Omega girl should even look in the eyes, but I looked anyway. He was a storm made flesh, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair black as the forest shadows, his eyes molten gold. He had just returned from war, they said. Blood still crusted the edge of his gauntlet. Even the elders bowed when he passed, whispering his name like it was both prayer and curse. Aedric Thornvale, the Alpha King of all northern packs, the wolf who ended wars with his bare hands. I shouldn't have been there. Omegas were not allowed in the High Court's hunting grounds. Yet something in me needed to see him, needed to see if the stories were real, if monsters could truly wear human skin. He caught me hiding behind the oak tree before I could even breathe. You think I can't smell fear, little one? His voice was deep, dark honey over broken glass. My knees trembled, but I stepped out. I wasn't afraid, I lied. He smirked, slow, dangerous. The kind of smile that said he could break you and enjoy every second of it. You should be, he said. And yet I wasn't. Because when his gaze met mine, something ancient and strange stirred in my chest, like the faint memory of a name I'd once forgotten. It made my skin ache, my pulse flutter. My tiny heart didn't know what it meant. But the wolf inside me, the one that hadn't even awakened yet, howled softly in recognition. I remember lifting my chin, too small to reach his belt, too stubborn to bow. When I grow up, I said, I'll marry you. For a second, he just stared, then made a laugh, low and dangerous, echoing through the woods, the kind of sound that made even the trees hold their breath. You'll what? He asked, crouching until his golden eyes were level with mine. I'll marry you, I repeated, voice trembling but sure, so you don't have to be alone. He tilted his head, studying me like a puzzle he didn't know whether to break or keep. Then he leaned closer until his breath brushed my ear. Careful, little Omega. Words have power. One day I might come to collect. The wind shifted. The forest whispered. I didn't understand what he meant then. That oaths made under the moon were binding in the old ways. I just smiled, thinking he was teasing. He stood, eyes glinting. What's your name, girl? Lyanna, I said. Lyanna Vale. His jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, something like pain crossed his face, gone as quickly as it came. Run home, Lyanna Vale, he said, turning away, before I change my mind about letting you live. But I didn't run. I watched him disappear into the mist, the faint glow of his armor swallowed by darkness, and the moon, that treacherous, listening moon, burned red as if sealing a promise it knew I couldn't keep. Years passed, but I never forgot. I grew up on the edges of power, an orphan Omega in a world that fed on fear. They called me the healer's mistake, the girl who talks to ghosts, the one the Alpha King spared. I learned silence. I learned how to hide, and yet every full moon, I'd sneak to that same oak tree, pressing my palm to its bark and whispering, "Do you remember me?" Because I remembered him, always him, even when the nightmares came, the sound of wolves screaming, the scent of blood and smoke. Even when the elders whispered that the Alpha King had gone mad after the war, that he ruled with fire and shadow, killing anyone who defied him, even when they said he would never love. Still, I remembered. And then, 18 years later, he returned to my life. The night began with screams. I was tending the wounded in the lower village, the aftermath of a rogue attack. The scent of iron and wet fur filled the air. My hands were slick with blood, my throat raw from shouting orders to the few who'd listened to an Omega healer. The moon was high, full, white, merciless. That's when the ground trembled. Horses shrieked. Doors slammed, and through the chaos, I saw him, older now, harder. His eyes were no longer gold. They burned like dying embers. His armor glinted with the sigil of the Black Sun, the mark of the Alpha King's elite guard, and when his gaze found me through the crowd, my heart forgot how to beat. Aedric Thornvale, the same man, the same wolf who had promised half in jest to collect one day, and he had come. He dismounted, boots sinking into the mud, and the villagers fell silent. His power rolled off him in waves, dominance, authority, raw hunger. Even the rogue corpses seemed to flinch. He walked straight toward me, stopping close enough that I could see the faint scar across his jaw. New, cruel, perfect. "Lyanna Vale," he said, voice quieter now but still sharp as winter air. "You've grown." My breath hitched. "Your Majesty," he cut me off. "Do you remember what you told me beneath the moon 18 years ago?" The world tilted. My hands trembled. I should have lied. I should have said I'd forgotten. But I couldn't. "Yes," he smiled, slow, predatory. "Good, because I've come to collect." And that's when I realized the stories about him weren't wrong. The Alpha King wasn't just dangerous. He was haunted. And whatever fate had tied us together that night beneath the moon, it was coming undone. They say when the Alpha King speaks your name, it stops belonging to you. Mine was no longer Lyanna Vale. It became a summons, a command, a curse wrapped in silk. When he said it, the world around me stilled. Healers froze mid-motion. Villagers bowed their heads. The air thickened until I could barely breathe. And in that silence, I could feel his power crawling through my skin like fire under ice. It wasn't attraction. It was gravity, and I was falling. Again. "Your Majesty," I began, my voice quieter than I meant. "I don't understand." "I'm just mine," he interrupted. The word struck like thunder. One single syllable, but it left the crowd shivering. My wolf, the quiet, patient creature I had long suppressed, whimpered low inside my chest. It wasn't submission. It was recognition. He took another step closer. I could smell the faint traces of smoke and steel on him, the ghost of the battlefield still clinging to his clothes. His eyes searched my face, as though he were looking for the little girl who had once dared to promise him the impossible. "Pack your things," he said. "You're coming to the capital." My heart hammered. "Why?" He tilted his head, a shadow of a smile tugging his lips. "You made me a promise, Lyanna Vale. Do you intend to break it?" That night, the Alpha King's riders burned through the valley. The village elders tried to protest, but one glare from him silenced every voice. By dawn, I was gone. I remember standing on the ridge above my home, smoke curling from chimneys, dew clinging to the grass, the world still innocent to the storm that was coming. My satchel held nothing but herbs, a worn dress, and the pendant my mother had left me. He waited beside his black horse, armor catching the morning light. "Last chance to run," he said. I stared at him. Would it matter? His jaw flexed. No. So I mounted the horse behind him, fingers clutching the edge of his cloak, heart beating so loud I was sure he could hear. And as the capital's gates swallowed us whole, I realized something terrifying. The child who once loved the Alpha King was gone. The woman who took her place didn't know whether she wanted to escape him or destroy him. The journey was long, 3 days through the Frostwind Pass, where mountains split the clouds and silence felt alive. The air grew colder the closer we came to the capital. Soldiers rode ahead, scouts shadowed the trees, and the Alpha King never once looked back at me. But I could feel him. Every breath, every heartbeat. He carried a heaviness in his aura, the kind of weariness that comes from killing for too long. Sometimes at night, when the campfire burned low, I'd wake to see him standing alone, staring into the flames like he was trying to remember what warmth felt like. I wanted to ask him if he ever thought of that night beneath the moon, if he regretted sparing the little Omega girl. But the words stuck in my throat. On the third night, as the wind howled through the valley, I finally gathered the courage. "You remember," I whispered. "Don't you?" He didn't turn. "Every curse has its origin." "I wasn't a curse. weren't you?" he said, his voice flat. After that night, the moon turned red again. My enemies rose from the graves I gave them. The Bondmark appeared the next morning, a scar I couldn't burn away. "You were a child. You didn't know what your words would cost." I felt my stomach twist. "What are you saying?" He looked over his shoulder then, eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "You bound us, Lyanna. You made me yours, and I have been haunted by that vow ever since." The capital was not what I expected. The gates of Thornvale Keep towered higher than any cathedral, carved with ancient runes and claw marks from wars long forgotten. Inside, marble floors glistened like frozen rivers, and the scent of cold iron hung heavy. Every guard we passed bowed, but their eyes followed me with something between pity and fear. An Omega walking beside the Alpha King. It was unnatural, blasphemous. When we reached the throne room, I saw the scars of his rule etched into every wall. Cracked banners, shattered stone, the lingering echoes of rebellion, and at the center of it all, upon a dais of obsidian, stood the throne itself. He gestured for me to step forward. "Kneel," I hesitated. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Then kneel because I asked." I dropped to my knees, my pride burning. His boots clicked against the stone as he circled me like a predator studying prey. Then he stopped behind me, and I felt the ghost of his breath against my ear. "There is a prophecy," he murmured. "It speaks of an Omega born under the red moon who would either save or destroy the Alpha King. I thought killing you would end it. But the night I saw your eyes, the same shade as that cursed moon, I couldn't." My pulse stuttered. "You brought me here because of a prophecy?" "No," he said softly. "Because my wolf wouldn't rest until I did. He didn't touch me that night. He didn't need to. His presence was enough to unravel me. He assigned me chambers near his own. Lavish, silent, guarded by silver-armored sentinels who looked more like jailers. At dinner, nobles whispered behind jeweled fans, their words sharp as blades. An Omega healer? The king must be bewitched. She'll be dead by dawn. But dawn came and I was still breathing. Days blurred into nights. I tended the wounded soldiers in the infirmary. They feared me at first, but soon whispers spread. The king's Omega healed with hands that glowed faintly under moonlight. I didn't understand it myself. My powers had always been subtle, but now they pulsed stronger, wild, as if the bond between us was waking something ancient inside me. And every night, I felt him near, watching, waiting, until one evening, he appeared at my door. The corridors were dark when he entered. The torches flickered as if afraid. I stood by the window, the moonlight spilling over my bare shoulders. He closed the door behind him. No guards, no witnesses, just the sound of the lock turning. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. He stepped closer. "You're mine, Lyanna. I go where I please." I turned, meeting his gaze. "You said that like it's supposed to comfort me." "It isn't." He reached out, tracing his gloved finger down the curve of my neck. My skin burned where he touched, not from pain, but from recognition, as if his touch completed something my body had been waiting for all these years. "You think I wanted this bond?" he asked quietly. "You think I asked to crave your scent every full moon, to hear your voice even when I close my eyes?" His control cracked for a second, and beneath the mask of the king, I saw the man, broken, yearning, furious at himself. "I hate you for it," he whispered. "And I hate myself more for not being able to let you go." My breath caught. "Then break it," he laughed once, bitter. "If I could, little Omega, you'd already be dead." The moonlight dimmed behind clouds. He turned away, but before he reached the door, I spoke. The words trembling out of me before reason could stop them. "I don't hate you," I said. He froze. "I don't hate you," I repeated, softer now. "Even if I should." He looked over his shoulder, and for the briefest heartbeat, the Alpha King smiled. Not the cruel, practiced smirk of power, but something fragile, human. "Don't," he said. "You'll regret it." Then he left, the scent of smoke and sorrow lingering long after he was gone. That night, sleep didn't come. I stood by the window until dawn, watching the sun crawl across the horizon, painting the city in blood and gold. Somewhere deep in the keep, the bells tolled. 3 slow chimes. A warning. The Alpha King's enemies had returned, and with them, the prophecy was about to come true. They say the bond between an alpha and his fated mate can drive both to madness if resisted for too long. If that's true, then madness must have already taken root inside us both. Because the closer I was to him, the louder my wolf became. Days in Thornvale blurred into one another. Gray light filtering through cold stone halls, whispers following me wherever I went. The courtiers avoided my eyes, calling me the cursed Omega behind their jeweled hands. But every night I felt it. His presence. Aedric. He haunted my dreams like smoke curling through locked doors. Sometimes I saw his face covered in blood. Sometimes, his voice whispering my name in a tone so low it burned straight through the thin thread of my sanity. And always, the same promise echoed back. One day, I might come to collect. That morning, I was summoned to the Great Hall. The sun had barely risen, yet the throne room was filled with nobles in their ceremonial blacks. They stood like vultures circling a dying beast. At the center, on the obsidian dais, sat the Alpha King, his eyes unreadable, his aura burning like wildfire restrained by chain. He motioned for me. Come forward. Lyanna. My steps echoed through the silence. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but his gaze pinned me in place like a blade to the throat. When I reached the base of the dais, he spoke, voice sharp enough to cut glass. The council has doubts about your presence here. They question whether a lowborn Omega has any right to stand in the king's court. Whispers rippled through the hall. A man in silver armor stepped forward, Lord Kael, commander of the royal guard. Your Majesty, if I may, the girl is an untested healer. She has no lineage, no standing, no— Aedric's glare silenced him mid-sentence. No what? The king said softly. No right to breathe the same air as me? To exist? Kael swallowed. My king, I meant no— Enough. The word carried power. Raw, ancient, absolute. Every person in the hall bowed instinctively. Then, the Alpha King rose. He descended the steps slowly, his boots echoing across the marble until he stood before me. He reached out, brushing his thumb over the scar on my wrist, a scar I'd had since childhood. It had appeared the night I met him under the red moon, and now, under his touch, it glowed faintly, silver light bleeding through my skin. Gasps filled the room. She bears the Bondmark, someone whispered. Aedric's eyes met mine, and in that instant, the truth crashed over me like lightning. This mark wasn't just fate. It was blood. He had marked me when I was a child, not in the way lovers did, but through power, an oath older than the pacts themselves. She belongs to me, he said, and though his voice was steady, I saw the war behind his eyes, the fury, the regret, the hunger. That night I couldn't breathe. The bond pulsed through every nerve like fire. I tried to fight it, to push his presence out of my mind, but it was like trying to stop the tide. I felt him even when he wasn't there, the weight of his hand, the echo of his heartbeat, the memory of his scent in the dark. I stumbled to the bathing chamber, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection looked foreign, eyes glowing faintly amber, veins thrumming with heat. What are you doing to me? I whispered into the mirror, and then his voice, low, rough, came from behind me. Nothing, he said. The bond does what it wants. I spun around. He was standing in the doorway, half in shadow, the moonlight catching the edge of his jaw. His shirt was undone, revealing the mark that burned across his chest, an identical sigil to mine, glowing faintly through his skin. We're cursed, Lyanna, he said. You think I wanted this? You think I can bear to want you, when every touch feels like sin? Then why don't you break it? I hissed. He laughed, bitter and hollow. Because the gods tied it. And what they tie? No man can sever. He stepped closer, and the air between us turned molten. You were a child when you said those words, he murmured, his fingers brushing my cheek. But fate doesn't care for age or innocence. It heard you, Lyanna. It bound us before either of us could choose. He leaned down until our foreheads almost touched. My heart hammered against my ribs, wild and terrified. What do you want from me? I breathed. His gaze dropped to my lips. Everything I shouldn't. Then, as if realizing what he was about to do, he pulled away violently, his breath ragged. I can't, he said. If I take you, I'll ruin you. He turned and left, slamming the door behind him. But the bond didn't care. It burned brighter. It wanted him. And no amount of fear could smother that. The days that followed were chaos. The border packs began to rebel again. Messages came from the south, rogue alphas uniting under a new banner. The council met in secret, and I could feel the tension thickening, choking the palace like smoke. Aedric withdrew from everyone but me. He barely slept, barely ate. I caught glimpses of him pacing the war room at night, whispering to his advisors, his expression grim. And yet, every time he saw me, that mask cracked just a little more. One evening, I found him alone in the library, his hands trembling as he stared at an old tome bound in black leather. What is that? I asked. He looked up, his eyes hollow. The prophecy, the one that cursed us. I stepped closer, reading the faded words etched on the page. When the moon bleeds red and the Alpha King spares the Omega child, their fates shall intertwine in blood and ruin. The bond will save one and damn the other. My throat went dry. What does it mean? He closed the book, his voice barely a whisper. It means one of us won't survive it. The fire in the hearth flickered wildly, as if reacting to the words. I should have run. I should have screamed. But instead I stepped closer, my fingers brushing his sleeve. Then let it damn me, I said. Not you, his head snapped up. Don't. Someone has to end it. Don't you dare, he growled, his control fracturing. You think I'd let the gods take you from me now after 18 years of this curse? I'd burn the heavens before I let them touch you. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist, and for the first time, I saw the Alpha, not the king, not the man, but the wolf beneath. His eyes glowed molten gold, fangs glinting under the dim firelight. The bond pulsed between us, and I felt my own wolf rising to meet his, ancient, fierce, unstoppable, and when our marks ignited together, silver light burst from our skin, wrapping the room in a storm of heat and shadow. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe him, maybe me. All I know is that when his mouth found mine, the world ceased to exist. There was no fear, no prophecy, no crown, only hunger and the taste of something forbidden and inevitable. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It was two souls clawing at fate, defying the gods who had written their doom. When he pulled back, his forehead pressed against mine, both of us shaking. This will destroy us, he whispered. Then let it, I said. At least we'll burn together. That night the palace trembled. Some said it was the storm. But I knew better. It was the bond. Awakening. And somewhere in the distance, as thunder split the sky, the first howl of war echoed across the northern mountains. The prophecy had begun to claim its price. End of Chapter 3. The Bond of Blood and Fire. They said the first howl of war would shake the mountains. They lied. It shook me. It started as a tremor in the marrow, a cold thread pulling tight from the base of my spine to the crown of my skull. The bond woke first, silver heat flickering beneath my skin, answering something beyond the walls of Thornvale Keep. Then the bells began. 3 slow iron chimes, and the world shifted from waiting to wanting blood, wanting victory, wanting an end. The courtyard seethed with motion. Armor hissed, leather snapped, torches coughed sparks into a sky-bruised purple. I moved like a ghost through it all, small and unnoticed, until they realized I was not a servant skirting shadows, but the Omega the Alpha King would not let out of his sight. I felt him before I saw him. Power parted the crowd the way a blade parts silk. Heads bowed even when spines hated the posture. Aedric crossed the cobbles with that impossible calm of his, grief stitched into the set of his shoulders. When his eyes found me, the thread between us went hot enough to hurt. He said my name without sound. I heard it anyway. He didn't ask me to stay behind. He didn't promise I'd be safe. He only reached for a gauntlet he had no need to wear and fastened it around my forearm, as if my pulse belonged inside his metal. The weight steadied me. The weight claimed me. We marched before dawn. The northern road cut the world open like a wound. Pine bent low, heavy with hoarfrost, and the river ran black under a skin of ice. Riders moved in two tides, his elite cloaked in the black sun, scouts loping at the edges with eyes already in the forest. Lord Kael led the vanguard, rigid in his saddle, devotion too polished to be true. I watched him watch me. I memorized the way his gaze never lingered when Aedric looked his way, but always circled back as soon as the king turned his head. I had been a healer long enough to recognize infection by smell alone. Kael's loyalty had the sweet rot of something dead pretending at life. We met the first wave at the mouth of Frostwind Pass. War is nothing like the songs. There is no rhythm to it, only collision. The world narrows to breath and blade, and the vicious intimacy of another creature trying to end the shape you make in the world. I didn't remember drawing my knife. I remembered the weight of it afterward, sticky with a life that wasn't mine. I remembered the way my power behaved differently in the chaos. No longer a slow, careful mending, but a feral flash. Close a wound with one hand, drop an enemy with the other, the bondmark on my wrist burning like a star trying to claw its way out. Aedric was everywhere. He moved like weather, fury muscle cast. I had seen him at rest, dangerous the way a cliff is dangerous, still until you fall. This was a different animal. He did not roar, he decided. Men died accordingly. When it was over, the pass was a throat filled with bodies and steam. Ravens gathered before the blood cooled, and still my hands shook. Not from fear, but from a strange clarity that felt like the moment before a fever breaks. I could feel something else. Not just him. Not just the bond. Something in the mountain watching me back. We pushed through by noon, and by dusk we'd thrown up a camp at the White Teeth, a ring of limestone spires where the wind sang like a grieving woman. The healer's tent filled before the fires caught. I worked until my palms went numb, until my skirts were black to the knee, until the man beneath my hands took a last rattling breath and thanked me for the minutes I'd given him. I learned long ago not to flinch when gratitude sounded like a question. When I stepped outside, night had already frozen the steam on my hair. Aedric stood a little way off, arguing low with his captains. He looked older in the torchlight, the scar at his jaw silvering like frost. He felt me and ended the council with a single nod. The captains retreated. Lord Kael did not move quickly enough. The king's voice went soft like a blade wrapped in velvet. You had men peeled back too soon from the pines. Scouts reported the ridge clear. Scouts report what they're told to see. The king's voice went soft like a blade wrapped in velvet. You had men peeled back too soon from the pines. Scouts reported the ridge clear. Scouts report what they're told to see. Kael's jaw flexed. You suggest treachery, my king? I suggest hunger, Aedric murmured. And hunger eats what feeds it. His gaze slid past the commander and found mine. Heat broke across my skin. The bond hummed high, a candle held too close to the wick. He said nothing, but I felt everything. The ache in his shoulders, the burn of the mark on his chest, the iron discipline he was bleeding to keep between us and the noose of prophecy tightening with every mile. We slept little. We dreamed less. When sleep took me, it delivered me to the night I had tried to forget. The red moon, the oak, the smallness of my hands when I offered my life to a stranger wearing a crown of war. But dream memory shifted, as memory does when it recognizes a lie. I was not alone with him beneath the oak. There had been another shadow at the tree line, a slash of silver, a whisper like torn silk. Spare the child, it had said in a voice that could have been a woman's or the wind's. And pay my price. I woke with frost leaking into my lungs and the taste of iron at the back of my tongue. The tent canvas shivered with something more than cold. When I reached for the pendant at my throat, the one thing of my mother's the world had not stolen, I found it warm. Warm as flesh. I went to the king. He was where he always went to be alone, at the edge of the camp, where the ground fell away into a black bowl of pines and old snow. He didn't turn when I came. He didn't have to. I saw her, I said. He said nothing. In the memory, the night we met, someone else was there. His hand closed around the hilt at his hip. Describe her. I couldn't see her face. Just silver, like light on a blade. A promise I didn't hear until tonight. The High Orison wore a silver veil, he said at last. She came to me the night before the mating moon. She said the red moon demanded a price, mercy or blood, and that mercy would cost me everything I had left. And you chose me. He exhaled a breath that might have been a laugh if it weren't so empty. I chose not to kill a child who asked me to let her love me. I have regretted and recommitted to that choice 1,000 times since. He turned then, and the mask cracked enough that I could see the man underneath. The one who hadn't slept without a blade within reach in 12 years. The one who knew exactly how many names he carried like stones in his chest. I will not regret you, Lyanna, he said very quietly, but I will not survive you. The bond flared hard enough to dizzy me. I reached for him. He stepped back like my touch was a cliff edge. For once I let him go. Morning brought snow and a messenger with a throat cut to the spine. They found him at the perimeter, eyes open to a sky that no longer had room for light. A strip of black cloth stuffed in his mouth, marked with a sigil we all pretended not to recognize. A sun drawn upside down. The black sun was the king's. This one had been turned. Kael argued for retreat to the keep, to consolidate and draw the rebels into stone and narrow halls. Aedric listened, and then discarded the suggestion like stale bread. We would take the fight to the ridge, he said. We would split their line at the tarn and break them on ice. He did not look at me when he ordered me to the rear with the healers. He did not say, stay safe. He said nothing at all, because words are doors, and he had no intention of opening any more doors than he had to. We moved at noon. The world became white and iron and old. Old hunger. The tarn lay black as an eye under its milky lid of ice. We reached the shore and found nothing. Too quiet is a sound. The hair on my arms lifted. My wolf pressed its body against my ribs and whispered a single instruction meant for creatures born to flee. Run. Arrows fell first. A hard rain hissing where they struck. Men went down with the same soft astonishment I had heard in their thanks the night before. Then the ridge exhaled bodies, and the world buckled into violence. I lost him. It should not have been possible. The bond burned so hot I could taste the metal of it, but smoke and terror cross-talked the signal until I couldn't separate my own heartbeat from the war beat trampling the ice. I moved without thinking. I stitched a man shut with one hand and opened another with my knife. I tasted wolfsbane when I inhaled, bitter and green and wrong. Something else rode the wind. Something that was not herb or iron. Spell. I felt it before I saw her. The air warped the way air does above fire. A woman in a veil of silver stepped onto the tarn like the ice wanted her feet. The High Orison's face had been hidden when I was a child. The woman standing in the middle of this death had no face at all. Only shifting light arranged into the approximation of a smile. I have come to collect, she said. And her voice was not voice but pressure, a hand closing around the throat of Winter. She looked at me, and the bond whimpered. Not him. Me. I understood then. Mercy had demanded an echo. The night under the oak had held 2 vows, not one. Mine, childish, reckless, binding, and hers, ancient, transactional, cruel. Save the child. Damn the king, or save the king. Damn the child. Prophecy wears 1,000 masks. All of them are your face. Aedric shouldered through 3 bodies to reach the ice. His sword smoked in the cold. He looked at the veiled woman the way kings look at endings. "What is your price?" he asked. She didn't look at him. She kept her blank light fixed on me. "You know it already." I did. I had known since the library, since the first time our marks had sparked bright enough to blind. One survives. One is the road, the other walks to survive. The Orison lifted her hand, and the Tarn's ice opened its eye. Water breathed, men screamed, the line broke. Aedric moved. Of course he moved. He always moved first, which is why he never learned how to run. He reached me as the ice groaned. He wrapped my body with his like I was a secret he was willing to die to keep, and I felt the blade before I saw it. A sliver of night sneaking between us, angling for my heart. Kael. His expression didn't change when the dagger went in. That was the worst of it, not the betrayal, the practice. He would have cut the cord between us if Aedric had been any other man. But the king had been born knowing how to lose everything except the thing that mattered. He turned, taking the knife, into himself where the Bondmark lay hot against his ribs. I heard the sound he did not make. I tasted copper that was not mine. The world swung on a hinge. The Orison's veil fluttered like a moth's wing. Her head tilted with the curiosity of a child pulling legs off a fly. "Oh," she said, and the sound was almost tender. "You choose again." He went to his knees with my name in his mouth. Not spoken, just there. He tried to tear the dagger free, but wolfsbane fanged the wound, and the ice liked the color of his blood too much to let it go. I became something else. Power is a quiet thing most days. On that ice, it found its mouth and sang. Silver roared through my veins. The mark on my wrist tore itself wider, until it was not a sigil, but a door. I put my hands on his chest and reached into a heat I had never allowed myself to touch. The bond did not open. It broke. It broke the way a window breaks outward, spilling the room into the night. Light tore through my palms. The wound hissed. Wolfsbane screamed and died. Aedric's eyes, wolf gold, king black, snapped to mine. "Do not," his gaze said. "Yes," mine answered. The Orison stepped backward. For the first time, the light that was her face flickered. "Moonfire," she whispered. "Impossible." "I was born under your red moon," I said, and my voice sounded like someone who had finally remembered her name. It gave me to him. It can take me too. The knife came free like a thorn pulled from a paw. Blood followed, dark and furious. I pressed my mouth to his mark and drank the poison out. It tasted like forest after lightning. It tasted like the first lie I ever told. He held my head with shaking hands and tried to pull me away. I would not move. When I lifted my face, the cut was gone. The mark between his ribs blazed silver white, blinding. The air cracked. The Tarn groaned like a living thing too full of rage to hold itself together. The Orison raised both hands, but whatever old law governed her shape had bent in the heat of what we'd done. Her magic slipped on the ice and fell screaming into the water. Kael ran. Of course he ran. I would have chased him if Aedric had not. Caught my wrist with a grip gentle enough to make me break. "Stop," he breathed. "Enough." There were still men dying. There would always be. But the tide had turned, and I had turned it. The soldiers who could stand did. The ones who could not watched me like something they had been taught was a myth until it stepped onto ice and made a choice. We did not win that day so much as we refused to lose. Dusk dragged its belly across the mountains. We brought our wounded home on sleds and shoulders. the dead we carried with our eyes. Kael vanished into the forest's black mouth, and the Orisons. Vale floated once before the tarn swallowed it whole. In the hush after battle, Aedric touched the place where my mouth had been, and shuddered like a man walking out of snow into a room where a fire has been burning all night. He did not thank me. He did not have to. My name in his eyes was thanks enough. Back in camp, the healers whispered when they saw what I had done. They made the sign against the red moon and stepped aside. I could not feel my hands. The mark on my wrist would not dim. I stood outside my tent and watched my breath sail into the dark and turn to frost. I understood the prophecy then in the way you understand a blade once it has gone in and come out stained with the part of you that keeps you warm. One of us would survive. I had saved him. I had chosen him. I would choose him again tomorrow and every day that followed, because love is not soft. It is a decision that hurts as badly as it heals. But the bond had tasted the cost and liked it. It would ask again. It would ask for more. When he came to me, he didn't touch me. He stood with his hands open like a man surrendering to an execution he had requested. "You burned yourself," he said. "I learned the shape of the fire. We have to end this," he said. And the way he said it told me he had finally decided which of us would be left standing when the gods had finished their meal. "No," I said. And the word belonged to the part of me that had been waiting 18 years to be brave in precisely this way. "We end it together or not at all." His mouth tilted, not a smile, but the memory of the idea. "Then we need a different law than the one that binds us." "We need the truth," I said, and my mother's pendant burned against my throat as if it had heard its name. Truth is the cruelest healer. It sets the bone in a shape that will hold, even if you scream while it works. We would go back to the beginning, back to the oak where a child had made a promise, back to the place where mercy had been purchased with a debt that had come due in blood. We would drag the first lie into the moonlight and watch what it became when it had no shadows left to hide in. The war would wait long enough for that. Or it would not. Either way, the next move was ours. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the fires, a wolf howled. It was not a challenge. It was an answer. The mountains did not shake, I did. And then I stilled, because the body learns. The patience the soul refuses when there is work left to do. I laced the king's gauntlet tighter on my arm and went to sharpen a blade I did not need for the truth I could no longer live without. The road home was quieter than any battlefield. We rode through the thawing forest, snow giving way to the black skin of earth. Behind us, smoke still smeared the horizon where Frostwind Pass had bled. The army limped. The king did not. Aedric's wounds were gone, but his silence carried the ache of every man who hadn't returned. The mark on my wrist pulsed to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Sometimes I thought it was the same rhythm. Sometimes I thought it was the only thing keeping me alive. We did not speak of the Orison. We did not speak of Kael. We spoke of nothing at all, because words had become too fragile for what we were. When Thornvale Keep appeared through the mist, its towers sharp as spears, I felt no safety. The walls looked smaller somehow, as if the things waiting inside had grown while we were gone. The court greeted its victorious king with applause that sounded like rainfall on a coffin. I stood at his side, the Omega that lived, the healer who burned, and watched the same mouths that had cursed my name smile too wide. Aedric raised a hand for silence. "The north is safe," he said. "But the war isn't over." "It never is." Then he turned to me before them all. "This woman saved your king," he said. "For that, she will no longer kneel." A murmur rose. Shock, disapproval, fear. He ignored it. He took the crown from his own head and placed it on the arm of his throne, not on mine. "Not on anyone's. I will not wear gold until I pay the moon's debt," he said. The hall bowed anyway. That night, I found him where I always did, at the highest balcony, watching the city breathe. The wind toyed with his hair, pulling the scent of smoke and pine through the cold air. The moon hung enormous above us, white, patient, unforgiving. "You plan to go back," I said. He didn't turn. "There's an end to this curse somewhere. I intend to find it before it finds you. I won't let you go alone. You don't have a choice. His tone was the same he used in battle, command wrapped in concern. I made the promise. I reminded him. Let me see it through. That broke something in him. He turned, hands closing around my face as if the world might take me if he blinked. Lyanna, if you come with me, you'll die. Then we'll die together. He closed his eyes. You don't understand what waits there. Then show me. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded once. The decision was a knife turned inward. At dawn. The journey to the old forest felt different this time. The air itself remembered us. Mist coiled through the roots like breath, and the birds refused to sing. We left the escort at the valley mouth. This was a road meant only for the cursed. By dusk, we reached the oak. It had grown enormous in 18 years, its trunk split down the middle like a wound that refused to heal. The earth around it was blackened. The scent of old magic thickened the air. This is where it began, I whispered. And where it ends, he said. He drew his sword, but the blade caught no reflection. It drank the light instead. The moment it cleared the scabbard, the forest sighed. And then she was there. The Orison, no longer veiled, no longer faceless. She wore the shape of something half-remembered, a woman made of moonlight and scar tissue, eyes too bright to be eyes at all. You brought her, she said. Brave, or foolish, Aedric raised the sword. You wanted payment. Take me, the Orison smiled. You were never mine to take, Wolf King. She is. The Bondmark on my wrist flared white. Pain bloomed like a flower under my skin. I fell to my knees, clutching the arm where his gauntlet still hung loose around my bones. The mark on his chest answered with fire. Aedric dropped beside me, catching my shoulders. No. Yes, she said softly. You asked for mercy. Mercy has teeth. The light from the mark seared through our clothes, through flesh, until it met in the air between us. The smell of burned magic filled the clearing. My heartbeat stuttered into his. I could feel his lungs fighting to keep mine breathing. He pressed his forehead to mine. Don't fight it, I tried to smile. You should know by now, I never listen. The Orison's laughter was wind through dead leaves. Children of oaths, look what you've made of yourselves. She lifted her hands, and the split oak groaned. From its hollow poured shapes, wolf shadows, eyes red, teeth long. Each carried the scent of our past, the soldiers lost, the lies told, the blood spilled in our names. The bond had kept them all, and now it wanted them returned. Aedric rose to meet them. Steel met spirit. Every cut tore another memory loose from me. I saw him through the shimmer. His face when he laughed for the first time, when he held me, when he killed for me. Each vision flickered, died. He was being unmade in pieces. I crawled to the oak, palm flat against its scarred bark. If this began with my promise, I whispered, then end it with another. I reached inward, past the pain, past the fear, into the molten place where the bond lived, and I spoke to it. Take me, leave him! Aedric shouted something I couldn't hear. The Orison stopped smiling. The bond answered. Light exploded outward. The shadows screamed and fell into dust. The oak split wider, spilling sap that shimmered like stars. The world tilted, and I felt weightless, free and falling at once. When the light cleared, I was standing. Aedric was on his knees, breathing, alive. The mark on his chest was gone. Mine burned black. The Orison watched me with something like sorrow. You have paid in full, she said. What happens now? I asked. The bond remembers what the body forgets. It will find its balance in time. If he lives, he will live for you. If you die, he will live because of you. Either way, the debt is done. She stepped back into the tree, and the oak closed around her. The forest exhaled. Aedric caught me as I fell. His hands were shaking. Lyanna, I told you, I whispered. We'd end it together. You saved me. I owed the moon a promise. He held me tighter, as if strength could anchor what was already fading. Stay. I will, I breathed, though the world was already dimming around the edges, in every heartbeat you have left. And then everything went quiet, except for him. His voice, his breath, his grief turned prayer. When I woke, the moon was low and the oak was whole again. Aedric slept beside me, crownless, human. The mark on my wrist had turned to silver ash. The air felt new, clean in the way things feel after a storm. The debt was paid, but something deep inside me whispered that the moon was not finished yet. Because mercy never gives, it trades. And somewhere, far beyond the forest, the war we thought ended was waking again. The night after I paid the moon's debt, the world pretended to be gentle. Snow fell soft as ash over Thornvale, muffling every hoofbeat, swallowing every blade's whisper. The keep breathed like a sleeping animal, warm in the middle, cold at the edges, ready to bite if you put your hand in the wrong place. Aedric kept one palm pressed over my heart, as if he could hold me to this side by touch alone. He slept in fits, a soldier's rest, all muscle and memory, waking at shadows only he could see. When he did sleep, he breathed my name, not like a king, like a man afraid of morning. I lay still and counted the spaces between those breaths, making a religion of his persistence. The mark on his chest was gone. Mine was not. Where silver had burned, a quiet black crescent curved beneath my skin, cool, patient, a reminder rather than a brand. When I touched it, the air shifted, listening, not the way it had when the bond ruled us. Not a leash, not a knife. Something older. Something that asked what I wanted and waited, want. The word felt dangerous. I wanted him alive. I wanted the war to end. I wanted a life that wasn't a bargain written in blood. Outside, a bell tolled once. The low note the keep used for news too urgent to sweeten and too late to hide. Aedric was on his feet before I could push the blankets aside, hand to the hilt he no longer wore indoors. "I'll go," he said. "I'm coming." He opened his mouth to refuse, saw the way refusal would break against me, and nodded once. We dressed in the dim, my healer's leathers, his night black coat with the shoulders worn where armor used to bite. When he offered me his gauntlet, I lifted my arm without looking away from his face. He fastened it slow, deliberate, as if the act itself might bind me to the hour. "Stay behind me," he said. I didn't promise. We followed the bell to the inner yard. The snow there was troubled, crisscrossed with too many boots, the sort of pattern men leave when a secret steps out of its room and asks to be walked. A sentry knelt in the slush, bareheaded despite the cold. His breath shuddered like a dying candle. "Speak," Aedric said. "They're at the river gate, The sentry swallowed the habit of the old title. "They're inside. Who?" "Your guard, sire. The Black Sun." A flinch. Or what wears it? The cold found the inside of my bones. Aedric's jaw went quiet. Kael. Of course the river gate. Of course the keep's one vein that ran too close to the city for stone to remember it was stone. Of course the sigil turned upside down. Betrayal is a patient map. It always leads home. How many? Aedric asked. Enough. The captain's name moved through the yard like a sickness. Men glanced at the east tower as if they could see him already braced for the relief of giving their fear a face. Aedric turned to me then, and I saw the shape of the choice in his eyes. Lock me in the chapel under iron and prayer, or trust me with the same dawn he was going to walk into. The king hesitated. The man did not. "Stay with me," he said. "If the line breaks, run for the chapel and bolt the door. Only if you're behind me when it shuts." A ghost of a smile. Stubborn little wolf. We moved. The keep changed around us, the way a body does when it decides to live or bleed. Archers ghosted along the wall walk. Healers prepped tables and kissed tokens they pretended not to believe in. In the old chapel, someone lit every candle at once, so that the saints could see what men do in their names. We reached the river gate as the hinges shuddered. Iron on stone. Old bones remembering how to ache. Kael stepped through. He wore the Black Sun, but he carried it like a trophy, not a standard. Snow freckled his hair. Blood freckled his mouth. Behind him, men in the king's colors fanned out with the easy swagger of those who assume the story will bend to them. And behind them, shadows. Not soldiers. Not men. My fingers went numb and hot at once. The Orison was gone, married back to bark and myth. But there are always others willing to rent their souls to whatever currency power accepts next. "Your Majesty," Kael said, and bowed like a prayer made pretty to impress the god it lies to. Aedric did not lift his sword because he had not brought it. He did not need it. His voice was a weapon older than steel. You were always more punctual for death than for duty. I learned from the best. What do you want? Aedric asked. Kael's eyes flicked over me. Once to be seen. Now? His smile was neat enough to fit into a pocket. To be right. You chose a strange math to prove it. We are wolves, Kael said. We follow strength or we replace it. The North needs a king who can kill at the speed of a command, not one who misplaces his crown to chase a girl into a tree. I did not flinch. The thing under my skin did not either. It waited, it watched, it gathered. You shouldn't have come back, Aedric said. Kael laughed. I never left. The shadows behind him stirred. They had the shape of men until you looked into the spaces where their eyes should be. Cold radiated from them. Not the honest cold of a river or a winter's dawn. The wrong cold. The sort that grows in rooms where doors are locked from both sides. They smelled like a prayer said backward. Whites. Bound to a hunger older than the crown. Who gave you those? I asked. Kael tilted his head as if I were a clever child that would one day bore him. You did. Me? You burned the rules, he said simply. When rules burn, something is always born from smoke. Aedric's hand found the small of my back. Not to hide me, to remind me of gravity. This is last light, Kael said. Hand her over, abdicate, and I will let you keep your head long enough to watch what a real king looks like. Aedric stepped forward once. Casual. Like a man going to meet a friend at the edge of a river that has always been there. If you were a king, he said, you would not need to ask. Kael nodded as if a lesson had landed, as if he was happy to be a student the moment before he killed his teacher. He lifted a hand. The whites came like a tide. Steel rose around us. Arrows hissed. Men shouted the names of 100 saints and their mothers. I did not hear Aedric give an order, though the keep obeyed him anyway. The walls loved him even when he did not wear the gold that told them to. The whites did not bleed. They came apart like smoke where steel found them, then found themselves again because hunger remembers. Archers went for eyes that weren't there and felt foolish when it didn't matter. Back, Aedric said to me without turning, which meant forward, which meant with. I moved at his shoulder, a mirror held at a violent angle. The first white that kissed my skin hissed as if it had touched a forge. The black crescent under my wrist flashed once, and the creature shredded like fog pulled through thorns. I understood the waiting then. The bond had been remade into a thing I could aim. Moonfire, Kael spat. Pretty trick. Not pretty. Terrible. Beautiful the way a cliff is beautiful when you understand what falling is and jump anyway. I stepped into them. I did not throw light. I opened a door inside myself and invited the honest dark to leave. It poured out of me where the crescent curved cool and absolute, a night that made its own stars. Wherever it touched, the whites unmade, their borrowed shapes releasing with small sounds I did not want to call relief. Hold the living line, Aedric called to the guards. Let her take the dead. They obeyed, not out of fear. Out of faith so sudden and exact it made my throat hurt. Kael watched me as if I had insulted him personally by being alive. He moved through the chaos with ease, practiced, a blade that had always imagined itself an answer. He wanted Aedric. He wanted the world to see them together, the traitor, the king, so he could rewrite every story that had failed to include his name. He reached us in a breath. He lunged quick and clean for my throat, because he was done underestimating me and had returned to the math that never lies. Dead women don't change endings. Aedric was faster. He caught Kael's wrist, turned the blade, and drove it into the stone at the river gate so deep the wall winced. Kael stared at the hilt as if it had betrayed him by becoming an object instead of an extension of his will. You should have run farther, Aedric said. I ran exactly far enough. He said it like a man who still had a card, and he did. Always one more shadow in his pocket. From the stair to the wall walk, a figure detached itself. Not a white. A woman in a hood the color of winter sky. She lifted her head and let the hood fall. The high Orison's eyes looked out of a face I did not recognize. Not a ghost. A succession. Of course the order had more than one mouth. Children of oaths, she said, and the sound of her voice made the candles in the chapel gutter, though they were not near enough to hear it. Did you think we would leave the law in a tree? Aedric shifted, putting his body between me and the new edge of the night. "You have no bargain left," he said. "The debt is paid." "The debt," she agreed. "Not the design." She lifted a palm. The whites halted mid-devour. Steel froze inches from breath. Even the river seemed to hold itself in its skin, waiting. "It is not enough that you live," she said. "You must choose properly." "We already have," I answered. "You chose each other," she said. "That choice makes good songs, but poor law. The North is not healed by lovers who learn how to bleed. It is healed by a king who remembers what a crown is for." "I remember," Aedric said. "I put it down until I did." "Pick it up," she said, and put her down. The world narrowed to a coin balanced on its edge. I looked at him. He looked at me. He looked at the blade he had not drawn and the river that would take us both if we fell. Then he did something that made the Orison's mouth shape into surprise for the first time since she arrived. He knelt. He knelt, not to her, to me. "Lyanna Vale," he said. The yard a cathedral suddenly because he had decided it was won. "I have been king too long to forget that crowns are only honest when they are worn in service. I will not trade you for a story about strength that leaves my people afraid to love. If they must choose between a king without a bond and a man who knows his vow, they will choose the man, or they will make another king. And either way, the North will be truer than it was yesterday." He lifted his empty hands. "I choose you, and I choose them, both or not at all." The black crescent under my skin flared. Not pain, recognition. Consent, the oldest magic. I turned to the Orison. "You said the design remains. Designs can be redrawn. By who?" she asked softly. "By two creatures whose throats I can close with a thought?" "You could," I said. "But listen." She did not want to. She had to. The black crescent turned my voice into a thing old magic remembered to obey. "Listen to the keep," I said. "To the men who did not run. To the women with blood up to their elbows who kept sewing anyway. To the boys on the wall who have not yet decided what kind of men they will be. To the city under the hill, holding its breath to see if morning belongs to wolves or graves." The river moved again, slow, stubborn, making a noise like agreement. "Law is not a knife you hold to the throat of a story," I said. "Law is the promise a story makes to its children." Aedric stood, not because he had been dismissed, because he had decided he was done kneeling. He reached for me, not to hide me, but to stand where standing meant something. Our shoulders touched. The crescent under my skin quieted, waiting like a pupil who knows the right answer and will not interrupt the teacher's last mistake. "Rewrite it then," the Orison said, almost gently. "If you can." I had not brought a blade. I did not need one. I lifted my arm. The crescent spread, not outward, not a flood, but upward, a new moon ripening into a thin, bright bow. It cut the dark like a first truth. I spoke the vow not as a child, not as a supplicant, but as a woman who had learned the cost of wanting and paid it in her own coin. "I vow this," I said, and my voice reached places in the keep where no voice had been allowed for 100 years. "That bonds made under fear bind nothing. That vows made under mercy are not debts, but bridges. That a king's strength is the tenderness he refuses to trade for obedience. That a queen is the name the people give the woman who remembers them when power forgets its manners. Queen. I had not meant the word. The yard did. The whites sighed and undid themselves, released from the shape hunger had forced on them. Kael stared at the empty air where his army had been, and finally looked like a man instead of a blade. The Orison lowered her hand. "Not in defeat, in acknowledgement. Very well," she said. "Let it be written where it can't burn." She tilted her face to the snow. When the flakes touched her skin, they did not melt. But understand, girl turned wolf turned law. The moon does not keep books. It keeps stories. If you forget this day, the design will remember you. "I won't forget," I said. "See that you don't." She turned and walked into the thin air as if it were a door only she could see. Kael made the last mistake of his life. He reached for me with empty hands, which are worse than hands that hold knives. They tell the truth about the mind using them. Aedric stepped between us and did not draw steel. "Mercy," he said to the guards. He dies clean. Kael laughed, small and cracked. You think this means you won? No, Aedric said. It means I learned how. They took him to the yard's edge, where the stones remember the names of men who taught them what red weighs. Kael did not beg. He did not ask for a priest. He looked at me and tried to give me back the fear I had spent. I did not take it. When it was done, the snow fell without ash in it. The keep breathed again. We stood very still in the middle of the world we had just rewritten and waited to see if it would hold. It did. Not because of crowns, or knives or women in winter-colored hoods, because the people who had watched us decided with us. A sound rose, thin at first. A howl, then another, then the city's old voice lifted from its sleep and made itself holy, human throats and wolf throats and the river beating time, a choir rough with frost and grief, and the sort of relief that makes laughter feel like a cousin. Aedric turned to me. There was nothing of the king on his face, and everything of the man. Marry me, he said, not as a command, not as a debt, not as a way to make a prophecy behave, as a question he already knew he could survive if the answer was no. When I grow up, I said, and he smiled in spite of himself. You did, he said. You are. You will. Yes, I said. We did not put on crowns that day. There would be time enough for ceremony, for law inked onto vellum where the voices that come after us could learn to speak without swallowing their own names. We went back to the oak, because beginnings are greedy. They always want to be endings, too. The forest had shed its fear and kept its teeth. The oak stood whole. It split healed into a seam only those who knew where to touch could feel. We put our palms there and felt the tree remember us. I did not hear the Orison. I heard a quieter thing. Approval, perhaps. Or only the wind harmonizing with a vow spoken in the right direction. We said our words without witnesses in fine clothes. The only audience was the small animal at the root of my heart. Watching from the dark it had learned to make into a home. I will not ask you to die for me, he said. But if death comes, I will not let it reach you first. I will not bind you, I said. But if you wander, I will call you back by the name you keep hidden from yourself. We did not kiss to seal it. We breathed the same cold air, and the air kept our secret until it realized it was not a secret but a promise. And then it told the world in frost. When we returned, the city had already begun to behave like a place that believes in mourning. The crown sat where he had left it, on the arm of the throne like a tame animal, patient, perhaps a little embarrassed about its behavior. He picked it up, weighing not the gold but what it meant. He did not put it on his own head. He set it between us on the obsidian, and I understood. This would be the room's center, not ours. We would not stand above it. We would stand beside it, and anyone who needed to speak to it would find us there too. That night, he slept without waking at shadows. I did too. I dreamed of nothing. Not blood, not prophecy, not knives, quiet, the rarest magic. In the morning, I watched him in the first light, and thought of a girl with muddy feet telling a monster a future she had no right to promise. When I grow up, I'll marry you. I smiled into the dawn. He had married me back. The war did not end because we asked it to. Wars never do. It ended in pieces. As laws shifted, as men with Kael's smile found themselves bored by the lack of rooms that wanted it, as the city learned the taste of bread baked without ash in the flour. It ended because we got up every day and kept ending it. Sometimes the crescent under my skin whispers. Sometimes the river sings the tune we taught it. Sometimes the oak drops a leaf into my palm even when it isn't autumn. Once, at the end of a long council where no one raised their voice, I found Aedric looking at me as if remembering a night in a courtyard full of knives where he knelt and nothing broke. What? I asked. I used to think strength was what you could hold, he said. Then I learned it's what you can put down. We did not wear gold to bed. We wore breath and the easy weight of a life we had chosen twice. On the last morning before spring stopped lying and kept its promise, I went to the wall and looked out over a city that had decided it wanted to live. The clouds lifted like a curtain, A shaft of light reached from the mountain to the chapel roof and found me by accident or design. I lifted my arm. The crescent answered, "Not bright. Enough." Below me, the gates opened. The people came and went without bowing, and the guards nodded like men who were already thinking about lunch. And the river kept pretending it hadn't helped write a law. It is strange, the way the world keeps going, when you have done something that should have stopped it, and made it start again with a different name. Strange and merciful. The moon will bleed red again one day. It always does. And when it does, some child will sneak out of a house that loves them and find someone terrible and kind beneath a tree that remembers how to be broken and get better. They will make a promise with a mouth that is still learning the shapes of words. If I am there to hear it, I will not interrupt. I will only listen, and trust the story to do what stories do when we stop trying to turn them into knives. Live and love, and write the law in the space between two hands reaching for one another at the edge of dawn. Subscribe to the Alpha Love Stories and become part of our pack. We post new tales of forbidden love, dangerous alphas, and powerful omegas every week. Hit the like button, leave a comment with your favorite moment, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss when the next story drops, because in this world, love may hurt, but it always howls back. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay wild beneath the moon.